Hello everyone and welcome to another instalment of In Defense Of, a video series in which I look at some of the most misunderstood characters on the Walking Dead TV show and attempt to put forward my case in perhaps giving them a second chance. In this video I'll be looking at the character that most men would not want to be left with their wives, Shane Walsh. So without further ado, let's begin. First off, I should note that Shane is a bit of an oddity when compared to the rest of the characters on this video series because he's actually quite popular with the fan base. Whereas in previous entries I've spent my time trying to justify why fans shouldn't hate the person in question, that's not what I'm trying to do this time around. So then, what is the point of the video, you ask? Well, the goal was to try and get across a better understanding of how he turned from the man who was at Rick's side when he got shot to the man who would then lead him into a trap to try and kill him. I'm not trying to be a patronising arsehole. You may already feel that you understand what caused Shane's transformation, and that's absolutely fine. However, I just want to run through my feelings about him because for me, I find him to be one of the most tragic characters on the show. Though interestingly, when I first watched The Walking Dead, this wasn't how I felt. I mean, I didn't hate him or anything first time around, I actually thought that he was a pretty decent villain. Notice though that I just used the word villain because on second viewing, I didn't really see him as the bad guy. I mean, yeah, sure, his character does do some pretty abhorrent things during his time on set, but I think that's partly down to the fact that he had already adapted to the new world faster than everyone around him. When you look back at a lot of the arguments he made regarding what the group needed to do, you realise that a lot of them were actually right. In fact, a lot of the ideas which were rejected by his peers were things that Rick would go on to do later down the line anyway. Unfortunately for Shane, the group just wasn't as practically minded as he was, leading him to become a bit of an outcast. This is all well and good me saying this, but what you really need are examples. So I'm going to use the example of the classic scene in which Shane goes crazy when he sees Rick bring back walkers to the farm. Because to me, this particular scene is a stellar example of how I viewed his character differently over two separate viewings. When I first watched this scene, I was kind of pissed that Shane just felt like he had to interfere with what was going on. I mean, I'd just seen Rick work his arse off trying to get these walkers back to the farm, and then this hothead comes over to try and mess things up. Yes, even back then, deep down, I did know that Herschel was being naive in thinking that the walkers weren't dead and could be saved, but at the end of the day, that's his business. If that's what he wants to do, then just leave him be. Now compare this to my thoughts on second viewing, and it was almost like I was watching a completely different show. Instead of being annoyed at Shane when he sprinted over to Rick like Usain Bolt, this time around I was actually cheering him on. The walkers needed to be put down, and he was the only one who had the balls to do it. I used the word hindsight earlier, and hindsight is exactly the reason why my feelings on this scene were so different second time around. By the time I'd watched the show again from the beginning, I'd seen the horrors of The Walking Dead. I'd witnessed where hesitation and trusting the wrong people could get you. On first viewing, my mindset was more like Rick. I was more wary and cautious, and I wanted him to do whatever Herschel asked just so he could get a place on the farm. However, on second viewing, I was more like Shane. Practical and unwavering. The walkers had absolutely no business being stored in the barn. That was an accident waiting to happen, and Shane did the right thing. I mean, just imagine if when Rick went to Alexandria for the first time, he sat down with Deanna and Deanna said to him, "Oh, I should let you know that half the houses here are home to the undead, who I don't want to kill." Now, what do you think Rick's reaction would be? Honestly, I think he would have just called the woman crazy and ran for the other direction. Because ultimately, what's the point of living somewhere if you're not actually safe there? Again, going back to the barn scene for a moment, just imagine that Shane didn't go crazy and Rick and Herschel managed to get the walkers in the barn, and then Herschel allowed everyone to stay on his land. This sounds great, right? Well, not really. Like I said, having a place to stay is all well and good, but would you really want to stay somewhere where there were walkers living next to you? I know I wouldn't. I mean, this may sound like a bit of a weird thing to say, but in Shane doing what he did, he actually saved Herschel. Had Herschel been allowed to store the captured walkers amongst his dead friends, he would have carried on living a life of delusion, thinking walkers were people that were ill, rather than people who were stone cold dead. It was Shane popping the bullets into the walkers that convinced him otherwise, something that he actually mentions to Rick during the next episode. Yet Herschel thanks Shane for showing him the true nature of the undead by letting everyone stay and telling him to leave. A bit harsh if you ask me. Now, I used the word safe just a moment ago, and the concept of feeling safe is extremely important when looking at Shane's downfall. Sounds weird? Well, allow me to explain why. Whatever your thoughts are on Shane getting with his best friend's wife, there can be no doubt that he actually had real feelings for Laurie. By the time Rick meets up with the Atlanta group, Shane had already been through an awful lot. He'd seen his best friend be shot and nearly killed. He'd then seen the military go into the hospital and start killing everyone regardless of whether they were alive or walkers. And he'd obviously seen the rest of the world go to absolute shit as Rick was having a good old nap. By the looks of it, he'd also been a de facto leader whilst Rick was in his coma, meaning it was his job to keep everyone safe. I think it's fair then to assume that everything that happened had taken its toll on Shane, causing him to stress and ruminate constantly about the group he'd been tasked to look after. And then when Rick comes back into Carl and Laurie's life, he has to deal with them being taken away from him. For the record, I do think it was really bitchy of Laurie to tell Carl that he wasn't allowed to spend any more time with Shane when she didn't have a problem with that before Rick arrived on the scene. The point I'm trying to make is that with Shane no longer being responsible for Laurie or Carl, he could no longer protect them, meaning their safety was out of his hands, which isn't something I think he could cope with at that moment in time. It certainly didn't help that Rick kept getting himself into dangerous situations and doing things that Shane wouldn't. Almost as soon as he arrives back at camp, he then sets out to go and save Merle, something that Shane argues against. I can actually see where Shane is coming from. Rick has just come back from a near-death experience, and here he is running off, leaving his wife and kids at the first instant. Shane, on the other hand, he wouldn't do that. He would want to be by Carl and Laurie's side. Yes, you could argue that this kind of protection is a bit clingy and overbearing, and you could probably say that it's selfish on Shane's part for not trying to save the people in the city, but hey, Shane's main priority was trying to protect his family. Or, well, his make-believe one. And Shane is nearly proven right that Rick leaving wasn't the right thing to do, as the camp is subject to a walker attack whilst he's away at the city. Had Shane not decided to stay back and protect the camp, who knows what might have happened. Of course, this isn't the only time that Shane and Rick don't see eye to eye when it comes to the security of the group. During the installment Cherokee Rose, Shane proposes that everyone on the farm needs to learn how to shoot guns, something that Herschel opposes. Herschel doesn't like guns and doesn't want any on his land, something that Rick says they all need to respect and abide by. Truthfully, this wasn't a very clever thing to do. However, Rick was of this mindset that if he did what Herschel asked him, then Herschel would allow him to stay. But again, like I've said many a time already, he did this at the expense of putting the rest of the group in danger. Add one more point to Team Shane. The next example when Rick does something that annoys Shane occurs during the episode Chupacabra, when Shane insists on keeping the search for Sophia going. Shane argues that based on their prior knowledge as cops, she's most likely probably dead, and Rick is only putting more people in harm's way by sending them out for searches for her. Again, although what Shane says is rather harsh, he does have a point. And in fact, he is proven correct when it turns out that Sophia was in the barn all along. I don't know about you, but I'm sensing a bit of a pattern here. Chronologically, the barn incident is up next, and I've already discussed that at length. However, one thing that I failed to mention is that this all takes place after Laurie finds out that Shane is pregnant, most likely with his child. Oh yeah, and Laurie tells Shane that the child will never be his when it most likely is. And people wonder why I don't like her. Now take a minute and just imagine yourself in Shane's shoes. Having an unborn baby you want to protect, but being forbidden to do so by the mother. And whilst you're doing your damn hardest to try and keep everyone alive, you see Rick doing things such as not allowing anyone to have guns, sending people out on searches, and capturing walkers and bringing them back to the farm. No wonder he lost it. Up until this point, Shane wasn't in a good place, but the revelation that Laurie was pregnant was what drove him over the edge to madness. Being a father to a soon-to-be one-year-old, I know what it's like to be protective of your child, and also to be protective of your partner during pregnancy, making sure they don't hurt themselves or the baby. Not only was Shane not allowed to protect his child, he had to leave it to Rick, who kept making incompetent and dangerous decisions. If I was Shane, I'd probably go crazy as well. Speaking of crazy, it was the appearance of Randall that finally broke Shane. Looking back now, it does seem kind of bizarre that Rick would save someone who was trying to shoot him, especially as we've seen him kill people who were helping him during the latest season. Though joking aside, I do get why Rick saved Randall. He wasn't the man then that he is now, and maybe he just didn't think that Randall was a threat, but it was still a risky move in bringing him back nonetheless. After not being able to release Randall as planned, the group decided the best thing to do was kill him in order to keep the farm's location secret. And just when Rick is about to kill Randall, Carl arrives to watch, causing Rick not to be able to kill a man in front of his son. It's at this point that Shane realises no matter what the situation, Rick is simply not going to be able to do what's necessary in this new world. As we all know, this does turn out to be kind of false, as Rick has become something of a serial killer lately. However, at this moment in time, he wasn't the man to make the tough decisions. I do understand why Rick couldn't kill him. I mean, he didn't want to blow a guy's brains out with his son chewing on in the background, because Carl would then think this kind of thing was normal. That was Rick's way of protecting his son. However, Shane's way of protecting him would have been to simply kill Randall. To be honest, I always saw Randall as a bit of a pathetic character. I mean, I don't think he was the type of guy who was going to come back with an army and try and overtake the farm, but you never know. I mean, the termites looked like pretty nice people before they started eating everyone. Once again, Rick had potentially put Shane's unborn child in danger. There was no going back for Shane now. Shane then killed Randall and created a cover story about Randall attacking him, just so he could have the opportunity to kill Rick. Whilst it is now impossible to defend this course of action, I just think that at this moment in time, Shane had reached a point where he knew that no matter what he did, Rick was not going to be able to change his mindset. Every single time Shane made a suggestion, Rick shot him down and then backtracked on what he wanted to do, often in Shane's mind to the detriment of the group. I don't think Shane wanted to kill Rick necessarily because he hated him. He just thought that based on what he'd seen with him being in charge, he wasn't able to make the tough decisions that would keep Carl and Laurie alive, which is actually kind of true, well, because they're both dead. Well done, Rick. Ironically, in that moment in time, Rick did step up to kill Shane, and he actually has become more and more like him with each passing season, which is again another reason why I can now sympathise more with Shane's character. Even the moment in which he killed Otis, which annoyed me originally, doesn't really irritate me that much now. I'm sure we can all agree that sacrificing someone in order to facilitate an escape is a pretty disgusting thing to do. However, the majority of the other characters on The Walking Dead have all done pretty sick things as well in order to survive. Again, when you think about it, if both Shane and Otis had died and not been able to get the equipment back to Herschel, then Cole would have also died. So in a way, Shane killing Otis so he could escape was actually what helped Cole survive. Of course, there remains horrible acts that Shane committed that I just can't defend, but hey, we wouldn't have really had much of an antagonist if everything he did was reasonable. The show needed us to root for Rick during the final confrontation, and this would have been a lot harder to do if all of Shane's actions were defendable. I think one of the reasons I find Shane to be such a fascinating character is because the show did such a fantastic job of portraying his turn from Rick's best friend to his enemy. Unlike the rest of The Walking Dead's rogue gallery, when we first met Shane, he was a normal guy. On the other hand, the governor was pretty evil when we met him, as evidenced by him waving the white flag at the army base and then shooting them all. Gareth was a messed up cannibal when we first met him too, and Negan's introduction was straight out of the comic books. Shane, however, was different. We as viewers went on a journey with him into the darkness, and this in my mind is what makes him more compelling than the rest of the adversaries that Rick has faced. I've always liked Shane as a character. However, on first viewing, I was definitely Team Rick. However, on second viewing, I realised that Shane wasn't the impatient hothead that I'd taken him for, and in fact, I actually found myself siding with him during a lot of the issues that he raised. Shane was not only ahead of the rest of the characters in terms of adapting to the apocalypse, he was also ahead of the audience. And if you've only once watched through The Walking Dead's first 2 seasons, then I urge you to rewatch it, as it may just make you change your stance on Shane Walsh. So there you have it, there's my feelings on Shane. As always, I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and until next time, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.